Good morning. I want to thank y'all for being here. As y'all know, I intend to lay out Senate Bill 7. We have several panels of invited testimony. We're expecting significant public testimony. I intend to substitute and vote out Senate Bill 7 today. I also intend to vote out 2 matters of pending businesses. Be a longer hearing than normal. Hopefully it will be informative. Hope it will answer questions of the folks that have it. But this is a good day for Texas water world. With that, I'm going to pass the gavel and allow Senator Hancock to run the committee. It's the only bill on our agenda other than the pending business.
This time, the chair lays out Senate Bill 7 and recognizes Chairman Perry to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I do have a committee sub to
There's
explain
a committee
later.
substitute. Senator Perry lays out the committee. Senator Johnson lays out the committee substitute. Senator Perry will explain the difference in the committee substitute and the bill is filed.
Members, I want to thank everybody that's participated in this couple of years process. It's actually been a passion of mine for several years, and a lot of people in the water world for Texas. But we wouldn't be having this conversation today if it wasn't for all the stakeholders that showed up throughout the 2-year process. It wouldn't be as good a bill without that input. I want to thank the water world people. I affectionately call you my water family for being a participant in that. I thank you for everything that you've contributed to get us here today, as well as the House. I want to thank Chairman Harris. We partnered up about a year ago or so to make sure that we were part and parcel and in sync as we went through this process, and today we're in a very good place. We wouldn't be here without it, and I could not say enough that my committee director, Andrew Parks, was the guy that was responsible for dragging this old tired body around the state for the last 2 or 3 years and coordinating those meetings and making sure that the people that needed to know what we were doing were informed and allowing anybody that wanted to know what we were doing to be there. So I'm grateful for his efforts and his expertise in getting us here today. Members, Texas faces a long-term water supply crisis and substantial funding shortfalls for all types of water infrastructure. By 270, I expect Texas to need an additional 12 million acre-feet of additional water supply. That doubles the state's current water annual usage. Because it takes so much time and investment to develop new water supplies, the continued population and economic growth of Texas are at risk if we do not address this as soon as possible. Across the state, our aquifers are depleting. Surface water supplies of most of our river basins are at or very near total appropriation. Farmers are already running out of water. The state's only sugar mill closed last year due to water scarcity. Cotton, grain, and rice growers in several regions of our state are planning on less production each year. South Texas citrus growers have lost 3/4 of their citrus varieties. Our manufacturing and petrochemical sectors are at risk. Already site selectors are debating whether Texas will have enough water if they come to build their factories. Cities across the state are curtailing new residential and commercial development due to lack of available water supply. Survey of 52% from Rural Water Association said that they would be out of water in 20 years or less, with 81% of those having a time frame uncertain but believe they could be out of water. Members, as you know, we spent a lot of time over the interim studying this issue in depth. Many hours of oral testimony are taken by dozens of external stakeholders. Volumes of written testimony and documentary evidence were thoroughly reviewed. In December of 2019, our 319-page interim report unanimously recommended that the Senate constitutionally dedicate a revenue stream to Texas Water Fund, primarily for new water supply development. January, the Lieutenant Governor made investments in new water supply a top priority of his. This session, Governor Abbott made a dedicated revenue stream of $1 billion a year to the Water Fund, one of his emergency items. Senate Bill 7 is accumulation of our work as a committee and as the momentum of our effort has gained over the last few months. The bill is enabling legislation for the proposed constitutional amendment that will implement our committee's recommendations. Senate Bill 7 makes several important changes to state existing water policy. The bill expands the categories of water supply projects that can receive funding from the new Water Supply Texas Fund, which is the Water Fund's program mechanism for encouraging non-traditional water supply development to supplement the state's water plan. Senate Bill 7 also authorizes the Water Development Board to finance new water supply and conveyance projects throughout the state's participation and new water imports from out of the state sources. To ensure the cohesiveness of the state plan development of new water supply, Senate Bill 7 tasks the Water Development Board with coordination responsibilities, including the development of common technical standards for water supply pipelines, facilitating They must operate together wisely. Interconnectivity between the pipelines conveying new water from different sources, facilitating communication between all stakeholders to utilize existing right-of-ways for new water pipelines. In a nutshell, it is a master plan that will have all water supply development options in front of everybody involved in the water world to make sure that we're not missing opportunities through economies of scale, to make sure that we're getting the best use of taxpayers' dollars to develop that supply. To meet some of the state's other water needs, it authorizes the use of Texas Water Development Fund's dedicated revenue stream for flood infrastructure projects. We are moving floods underneath the water fund. That way it's not an afterthought or an outside. It's always going to be in consideration for additional money. To ensure strong legislative oversight, Senate Bill 7 creates the Water Advisory Fund, the Texas Water Fund Advisory Committee to oversee the distribution of money from the water fund in support of water projects across the state. Establishes legislative reporting requirements for Texas Water Development Board. To protect local control of surface water, this is important. To protect local control of surface water, Senate Bill 7 prohibits the use of state funding for new water supply projects to buy in-state surface rights out of their basin of origin. Similarly, this is critical too to those that have questions of what we're going to be able to do with the money. Senate Bill 7 prohibits water pipelines constructed using state funding for new water supply projects from transporting non-saline groundwater, i.e. fresh water, protecting the landowner's rights and access to our state's depleting freshwater aquifers. It has to be new supply, plain and simple. We cannot move water from one part of the state to the other, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and not create overall volume increase for people to actually have new supply. We purposely are pushing. We have to develop new sources and not deplete the existing resources any more than we already have or are already permitted to do. Members, the committee substitute. Rather than create an office within the Water Development Board to handle the coordinating responsibilities, as described earlier, the committee sub assigns those responsibilities directly to the board. The original file had created a authority, if you will, that was going to be, actually an in-house water authority inside the Water Development Board. It's just a direct board responsibilities going forward. Similarly, this committee sub streamlines but does not eliminate the board's legislative reporting requirements by honing in on data the board should have available internally. Committee substitute authorized the Water Development Board to cover TCEQ staffing needs attributed to new permit applications for board finance projects up to $2 million per biennium. The committee sub requires the new reservoirs financed out of the new water supply fund have all of the land acquired. A shovel-ready reservoir will have all permitting and all eminent domain and land acquired before it's eligible for funding. Committee substitute clarifies that the new water supply may be used to purchase raw water from an owner of a surface right through a water supply contract. Clarifies that TCEQ rules governing water supply contracts for in-state water do not apply to contracts for water imports. Committee substitute clarifies that new water supply may finance new pipelines to convey surface water from an existing source subject to TCEQ permitting requirements. And lastly, the committee substitute makes transfers from the water fund to the program funds irreversible. These changes were made to address landowner concerns, ambiguities, agency feedback, agency FTE requirements, and to preserve the integrity of the allocation method for water fund transfers. Members, Senate Bill 7 and the associated constitutional amendment represent a generational leap in the history of water policy. The actions we take through legislature vehicles will be remembered in years to come, and the 89th will be the session that people look back that laid the foundation for actually developing our water supply plan. Several invited witnesses today. I asked the members to listen to those folks intently. They have significant expertise in what we're doing and understand the bill probably better than I on some level. After going through it with them, they seem to have a good handle on it. I will remind members, in our current water plan, it tells us only 2 regional planning groups, 2 out of the 16, We're able to recommend water management strategies that, if implemented, can fully meet the needs for all of their water user groups. The remaining 14 groups were able to identify strategies that could meet the planning and users groups requirements. 2 out of 14 hit the target. We have to, the only thing that's keeping the state of Texas from meeting this need is resource. The water plan is an awesome foundation and a great tool to work and build on. It needs to be a coordinated effort so that we do get the supply developed to the areas that need it the most in the most efficient and best use of tax dollars possible. So that's what we're doing here. We didn't turn the water planning process on its head. We're taking all the great work that they've done to lay the foundation to know, one, we're fortunate that we have a plan that tells us we're short before it's too late. Think about that. If we didn't have a water plan, we'd be just throwing darts on a wall hoping that it stuck. So we know today, and we have had this information for decades, that we are short. All I'm doing is taking that and putting the one thing that's been missing, money, to the problem to solve it. It doesn't have a broken heart or a broken family attached to it. It's not political. It's just a matter of commitment to a vision. So that's what Senate Bill 7 and that subsequent HJR to follow, or HJR, SJR to follow, is going to do, is give resource to the vision that the plan has to meet the needs that we have tomorrow. In that plan, we have to be honest, and that's what Senate Bill 7 does, is it gives us a chance to have honest look at things that are in it that can't happen and find things to subplant or substitute for the things that will happen. And when we do that, and by 2050, with this money that's going into the system, we ought to be far ahead in meeting the challenges that we have in water supply if we're successfully implemented. The biggest challenge I face is it's $1 billion a year, and that's a huge commitment on the state. Everything in water starts at $1 billion. The bigger challenge I have politically is setting the expectations that just because the money's available doesn't mean we're going to solve it tomorrow. Our minds in the legislative process think in 2-year segments. It's just the nature of the beast. So I can envision a water fund having some funds accumulated for a session or two in the row, only because it takes that long to line these projects out. And then have legislators start asking why, and wouldn't that money be better spent somewhere else, and why do we keep doing that? So the challenge going forward will be to make sure that we keep the eye on the ball and we keep the expectations out there that it's going to take time. Everything in water is 20 years plus. And so as we move through this process in sessions to come, we will have addressed a need, but to be certain, there will be people that question what we're doing just because they don't see things happening as fast as they want. I have been assured by many folks that this money, there is already projects that meet the test of new eligible requirement for new supply requirement that we will plug some money into and get the ball rolling sooner than I thought. I hope that to be the case. The Water Development Board is going to be busy, so be kind when you speak to them. But we've got great people at their helm to make sure that we do it well and do it right. But the longevity of these projects presents a real challenge. It's as if we're starting a highway system and we don't have a road built yet. And we're not that far off. We surely have things in place that are working, and we have some good ideas. But that will be the legislature's challenge. It's the longevity of these projects. It takes a lot of people to get it right so that we don't abuse some of the things that we're going to have to do. There is no eminent domain granting authority in this, no new eminent domain granting authority at all. But in order to get some of these projects done, there will be some of those issues that come up. So anyway, members, I thank you for your patience on that layout.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Perry. The chair recognizes Senator Hinojosa, Senator Blanco, Senator Cocor, Senator Gutierrez. And thanks you, Senator Perry, for having that long-term vision and understanding your commitment, your passion to something that, frankly, most Texans up until the last 2 years didn't think about, and a subject matter that was fitting for the chair. someone who understands details and is willing to put in the grind to get us where we are today. So I do want to thank you for your work, your effort, and your vision for Texans of tomorrow. Any questions for the author? All right, members, the plan is that we're going to call up 4 at a time. I'd like to let them finish their testimonies before we have questions, so I encourage you, as they go through, I'm sure there'll be a lot of information, just jot down your questions and then we'll open it up before each panel. We do have a number of panels, but we are going to start with L'Oreal Stepney with the Texas Water Development Board, Bryant McMath with Texas Water Development Board, Jerry Mazur with Texas 2036, and Larry French with Texas Public Policy Foundation. And if you would, state your name, your title, organization, or who you represent, and position on the bill. Or you're just invited, so we're going to assume you're going to be very supportive of the chair. Why don't we start?
Okay.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, committee members. For the record, I'm L'Oreal Stepney, Chairwoman for the Texas Water Development Board. Joining me today is our Executive Administrator, Brian McMath. I first would like to begin by thanking Senator Perry for his years and years of service and focus on water for Texas. It's been very important. And also to the committee members for focusing on water demands, needs, and funding. I want to begin by talking about water demand and needs and projections, and it really starts with our 2022 State Water Plan. We're in full swing for updating the plan. We update it every 5 years, and so we have received some preliminary regional planning updates in preparation for the 2027 cycle. But in the 2020 plan, quick facts, you know, populations growing to 51 million by 2070, and we see, in the event of a very severe drought, projected decline in our existing water supply by 18%, down to 13.8 million acre feet per year. On slide 3, the water user groups in the plan have identified 6 million acre feet of potential shortage in 2070 if we are in a situation, again, similar to the drought of record conditions. Of course, this has an economic impact. The plan identifies $153 billion of economic damages if the plan is not implemented by 2070. And the capital cost, $80 billion in 2018 dollars, $47 billion of that is the state's potential contribution. And again, what we're seeing from preliminary estimates from the regional planning groups with updates will far exceed the $80 billion. Slide 4, you all have probably seen this before. This is our a map of the different planning groups around the state. 16 regional planning groups, all of the local entities are covered, have representatives on the planning groups, and it's a public process. 50-year planning horizon that goes into each plan, and again, it's a bottom-up approach, looking at worst-case drought conditions in a case of a drought worse than drought of record. On slide 5, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about our projected annual water demand by use category. The State Water Plan identifies 6 user groups: irrigation, municipal, manufacturing, steam electric, mining, and livestock. And as you can see from the graph right now, irrigation is has the largest water demand category, but is projected to gradually decrease by 20% over the planning horizon. But if you notice in 2060, our municipal demand is steadily increasing and will surpass irrigation. So municipal is gonna be the #1 user, and it'll be here before we know it, especially if our population continues to excel as it has. Water demand for mining, which includes oil and gas operations, is projected to increase through 2030 and then decrease roughly 30% in the later planning decades. Although the sector is relatively small, water users overall compared to irrigation municipalities in the use categories. And the remaining use categories are projected to remain the same through 2070. Next, I want to take a moment to talk about projected water demands. And quickly, I have a few maps here that really talk about the location of the demands and how that's anticipated to change over the next 50 years. So on slide 7, The next two slides, slides 7 and 8, are really just a visual comparison of how water demand in Texas will change based on by the county and sector. So, and again, just for comparison purposes. So in 2020, this single year represents a snapshot of conditions, which is the start of the 2020 planning decade. The units are in volume, the units of volume are in acre feet, and really just focus on the size of the pie charts. The pie charts are scaled by relative volumes of water, and as the highest volumes of demand are here are for irrigation. You can see in the Panhandle, in the Valley, and some in Southeast Texas. The irrigated ag use is blue-green, with municipal demand being red. And livestock mining and steam electric power are also included in the charts, but they're relatively small. So, and the color of the charts is consistent as I go through the presentation, but you can see if you turn the page on slide 8, how the red pie charts become much larger, and the blue-green ones become much smaller. So municipal demand, as I mentioned, in 2060 is going to overtake irrigation. And in 2070, as you can see by this particular chart map, the state water demand is projected to increase by 9% to 19.2 million acre feet in 2070. And again, significant increase in the municipal demand based on what we're seeing in the state water plan. If you turn over to slide 10, we want to talk about, slide 9, we want to talk about, move into water supply needs, projected shortages during a drought. So on slide 10, same sort of system and setup for these particular comparison charts. We're going to look at 2020, then we're going to compare it to 2070. So this slide estimates the water needs in 2020 by sector of use in each county of the state. And again, the needs for irrigation are pretty large, especially in the Valley and again, up in the Panhandle. And on slide 11, you can see the needs growing exponentially by 2070. You can see the red enters the picture again for municipal use, and again on slide 7. So there's a notable increase in municipal needs because the population continues to grow, and the water supplies are projected to decline. So again, I think this highlights the need for investment in water infrastructure in the state. On slide 12, let's move on and talk about what the state water plan lays out for water management strategies. In 2070, you can see the bar chart. This lays out percent share of total volume. I think the key thing to note, what I see from this chart is going to take a little bit of everything, many different tools in the toolbox to help meet our water needs by 2070. There's focus here on conservation, reservoirs, reuse, desal, aquifer storage and recovery, and several other different types of strategies. But it's going to take a little bit of all of these, because what works in a particular area may not necessarily work in a different part of the state. And I will point out at the very top, the largest bar is other surface water, and that includes things such as if a reservoir has additional capacity that's not already committed, maybe that can be transported to a different part, to a different community. Maybe that water is available. It also includes things like surface water desalination. So really a catch-all for other strategies that can be used to meet our water needs. Moving on, funding. Again, thank you to the legislature, the governor, for focusing on water funding this session. It's very important. I wanted to lay out for the committee some of the trends and data that we're seeing for water funding needs in the state. On slide 14, and we've shared this before, this identifies the funding needs for water and wastewater infrastructure using some of our federal programs as a bellwether, if you will, as our baseline. We get funding from two federal sources. One more than that, but for this particular case, for drinking water, state revolving fund, and for clean water, state revolving fund. For the clean water, that's really for wastewater treatment improvements, and then, of course, drinking water facilities. Under both of these programs, existing facilities typically get funded under the program, although there's opportunities for for example, a new wastewater treatment plant or upgraded wastewater treatment plant. But what we really see are entities that have lots of enforcement concerns with TCQ, and they come to our agency to help fill those voids. We see capacity issues, we see upgrades to lift stations or collection and distribution systems, so a wide variety of things that these funds help to fund infrastructure improvements. Right now, we're seeing 9 to 10% oversubscription and about $4 billion funding gap, and for both programs, $8 billion total in funding needs. On page 15, what you will see, we've talked about the state water plan, and we've talked about floods being added to the bill as an option for funding. With our recently adopted state flood plan, we adopted it in August of 2024, we see $54.5 billion in need for flood infrastructure projects. And then, of course, with the water plan, we've talked about this, $80 billion, 2018 numbers. I do want to point out, this chart also includes the 2012 numbers for the state water plan that was adopted in 2012. You see the $27 billion, which was the state share, 53 total. I think that number is really important, because if you turn over to the next slide, in slide 16, I want to talk about the SWIFT program and the success that we've seen. And the benchmark for that was the 2012 state water plan. The goal with the SWIFT program, the $2 billion of initial infusion, was to fund about $27 billion in projects over 50 years. It's been an incredibly successful program. To date, the Water Development Board has committed $14.5 billion in SWIFT program funding, supporting 65 state water plan projects with an estimated 2.1 million acre feet of water supply. So, and that's represented $1.7 billion in savings to really communities. At the end of 2024, which is the 10th funding cycle, we've closed $11.5 billion worth of funds, which is extraordinary because our original prediction for the first decade of that 50 was to fund $8 billion in projects, and we've done 11.5. So we've covered, in the first decade, 40% of the entire 50-year projection. So it's been a very, very successful program, and we recently received $5 billion in abbreviated application requests for our SWIFT program. And then finally, members of the committee, I wanted to, the last slide, slide 17, I wanted to highlight for the committee really the dollar values associated with the outstanding need that we see in Texas. This chart really, what we did was we looked at all of our major funding programs and identified through the solicitation projects, information that we've done for each funding program, how much we can fund and then how much remains, so that we can see the deficit. And as you can see, with SWIFT, about $5 billion. The SRFs, as I mentioned, 4.2 and $4 billion, about around 8. With the Rural Water Assistance Fund and Loan Assistance Fund, about $232 million. This time we focused on water loss and water conservation in implementing the Texas Water Fund. With FIF, $1.7 billion, that's what we know so far. And then some federal programs, lead service line replacement and emerging contaminants, $4.7 billion. So there's quite a bit of need in the state, quite a bit of infrastructure and new supply needs as well. And the state water plan focuses on new water supply needs, and these hopefully will give the committee an idea of how much need is out there in the funding for that. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. We're available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, you want to go next? Anything to add?
Just here for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jeremy, why don't you go next?
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. For the record, my name is Jeremy Mazer with Texas 2036. I'm here testifying in support of Senate Bill 7. And I want to thank the chairman for his time, extraordinary dedication, and leadership on this issue. Also want to thank him for inviting me to be here on this panel. I've provided the committee with a 4-page handout that includes some of the key data points that I'm going to cover. But for context, Texas faces 2 long-term water infrastructure challenges. First, we must expand and diversify our water supply portfolio for a drought-prone and growing state. And second, we must fix the aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems that are becoming liabilities to the communities that they serve. Let's start by talking about the water supply issue first. According to the most recent state water plan, over the next 50 years, we face a long-term water supply deficit of 6.9 million acre-feet of water if we don't expand and diversify our water supply portfolio and we're hit by a long, severe drought. Keep in mind, members, that drought is our enemy. If Texas fails to do this, if we don't expand our water supply portfolio and we're hit by that drought, then by 2050, the state will endure $165 billion, again, $165 billion in annual economic losses. And for comparison, these economic losses are more than twice than those that this state endured during the Great Recession and the COVID pandemic. The second infrastructure challenge that we face has to do with addressing our aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems that are becoming liabilities to communities across the state. As I shared with this committee a few weeks ago, the American Society of Civil Engineers just recently downgraded our drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. Our drinking water systems went from a C- to a D+, and our wastewater went from a solid D down to a near failing D-. On top of this, leaky pipes waste enough water each year to fill a major storage reservoir like Lake Buchanan or Possum Kingdom Lake, as Texas families and businesses endure thousands of boil water notices per year. The problems from these aging, deteriorating systems are like a series of small economic cuts that over time really amount to a meaningful wound to the state's economy. And we project that over the next 15 years, these aging, deteriorating systems will inflict a total of $320 billion in economic damages on our state. And for comparison, members, this is roughly the size of our current state 2-year budget. Texas 2036 projects that the state's long-term price tag for addressing these challenges equals $154 billion over the next 50 years. Again, $154 billion over the next half century. The breakdown of this figure is as follows. The inflation-adjusted cost estimate of what the state needs to spend on water supply projects in the recent state water plan equals $59 billion. Fixing our aging, deteriorating drinking water systems will cost $74 billion, and repairing our wastewater and clean water infrastructure will total just over $21 billion. Texas 2036 projects that existing state and federal financial assistance programs will work to cover about 25% of this funding need. This will leave a long-term water infrastructure funding gap of $112 billion in the decades ahead. The Texas-sized solution to this funding gap involves the constitutional dedication of state revenues to our water funds, like SB7 contemplates, as it serves as the enabling legislation for a separate measure proposing this dedication. That said, legislative oversight and performance accountability standards within SB7 are essential to any state revenue dedication for water infrastructure. The Texas Water Fund Advisory Committee established within SB7 will give the legislature meaningful, lasting oversight over the Water Development Board's use of monies allocated to the state's water funds. More importantly, the bill requires that the board report to the committee on the state's progress towards fixing our water infrastructure challenges. In particular, the bill requires that the agency report on progress towards closing our water supply deficit and fixing our aging, deteriorating drinking water and wastewater systems. These accountability measures are important for 2 reasons. First, they're going to allow the legislature to track progress and achievement towards addressing our water infrastructure challenges. And second, these measures will let taxpayers understand the value of their return on investment in water infrastructure. Mr. Chairman, I've been emphatically clear for the past 2 years about the need for a constitutional dedication of funding for our water infrastructure. But I think that so much is at stake here. We must have performance measures that track our state's achievement and success when it comes to tackling these big, long-term water infrastructure challenges. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership with Senate Bill 7 and the other bills that we can't mention here. I look forward to your questions at the end.
Mr. French.
Thank you very much. Chairman Perry, Vice Chairman Hancock, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Larry French with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here and to support this bill. The foundation supports the bill because it sets Texas on a path toward achieving water security. For years, the warning signs have been there. Texas is susceptible to scarcity in water. And that's not going to change unless we take significant steps to develop new water supplies and be diligent in preserving what we have. And every region of the state shares the challenge. Every region of the state will need to help solve the water challenges. But it's going to take more than just dedicating taxpayer money for solving this problem. It's going to take, as Mr. Mazur mentioned, government transparency and accountability to assure Texans that the significant taxpayer dollars proposed to be spent will yield water at the tap, water in the fields, and water to drive the economic engine of Texas. We think the bill hits the target on all those issues. The Water Development Board, they do great work. I used to have a job there, so I saw the inside of it, and they do fantastic work. But they now have in their house and available on the website 16 draft regional water plans that will form the basis of the 2027 plan. Now, they're draft. They could change. They're being reviewed. But they still present a very interesting and sobering picture of our water future. And that goes all the way out to the year 2080, if you can believe that. The bottom line is that Texas is going to face shortages and needs totaling nearly 6 million acre-feet per year, and that reflects a combination of both increasing demands due to population, as Chairwoman Stepney mentioned, and decreasing supplies, down 10% from the 2030 estimates. Most of that projected shortage in acre-feet per year is going to be in the area of municipal use and irrigation needs. Not surprisingly, the cities are going to show the greatest water demands. They're going to grow nearly 50% from 2030. But the growth in potential shortages is also exploding, increasing over 380% from that period. So in drought, each region is going to be affected differently, and there are going to be different strategies to address those needs. But what's very clear is that getting the water isn't going to be cheap or easy. Capital costs of recommended projects identified by the regional planning groups in their draft plans add up to about $155 billion. Now, that's over the whole period, but that's obviously a very significant number. More than half that money is going to be spent on strategies such as conservation, water reuse, surface water allocation. The foundation supports the, quote, all of the above strategies. But above all, we want to make sure that the new water supplies are given the highest priority. Conservation, infrastructure fixes are very important, but new water is critical to attract new businesses. And you can be sure that if we don't act, then other states are going to be promoting their hydroeconomic advantage over Texas. It's coming if we don't. One of the key elements of this bill, as Mr. Mazur indicated, is ensuring that taxpayer money is spent with rigorous safeguards that promote transparency, accountability. The foundation endorses the various requirements in the bill that support the bill's metrics and reporting requirements, both the frequency and the scope of those requirements. The report to the legislature will describe how the money is to be allocated from the Texas Water Fund to other board funds that will identify water supply projects in the state water plan that have received funding commitments. It'll describe financial assistance aimed at preventing or mitigating boil water notices, water losses, other issues. And there are other requirements as well, including addressing how water supply deficits during a repeat of the drought of record are being reduced, and it will describe the positive economic impact attributable to each project that receives money. So in conclusion, the foundation supports the bill. We're happy to urge its passage, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions, members? Yes, of the panel, this panel, go ahead, Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairwoman Stepney, just wanted to go over just quickly on your slide for projected annual water demand over the next, 25, 30 years. You have a rather flat line there for manufacturing. First of all, on the manufacturing side, is that going to include like our ports? Where's the consideration for water usage on increased companies coming into our ports, like Port of Corpus Christi, Port of Brownsville, Galveston?
If, Mr. Chairman, do you mind if we call in our subject matter expert?
Sure.
Sure.
We'll have him introduce himself and make sure we
thank
fill out
you.
our witness card. Or log on.
Good morning, Matt Nelson with the Texas Water Development Board. The question was about the projection for manufacturing demands.
Well, yes, sir. Manufacturing demands, is that, are the ports included in that manufacturing line, or is that, somewhere else? Is that considered a municipal or?
Well, I don't know exactly. I'm not familiar with ports that much, but the manufacturing side of things would ideally fall in the manufacturing category. There may be some municipal uses that occur at a port. It sort of depends on how that water was categorized in a water use survey and how it's reported to the board. But we try to separate manufacturing that is actually manufacturing into that category and other uses into, municipal uses.
Okay.
And commercial, there's commercial use in municipal as well.
Okay, that concerns me just in that, of course, y'all have done the study, but it seems rather low an estimate to me, just and especially when I'm looking at the map following, and you're showing your manufacturer increase over time down in South Texas area, especially down in Brownsville area. We see, there's just a tiny sliver there. There's a lot coming in.
Yeah,
we're pretty sure we've anticipated all that growth that's coming in.
We do our best to get information based on historical use. Then the planning groups give us information about what they know is coming, and we have a new set of projections that are going into the next state water plan that they've just developed their regional water plans based on. That has increases to manufacturing and commercial estimates. So that is increasing. So that would reflect more updated information, and the planning groups also provided information to increase those.
Sure, and then just go ahead, ma'am. Yes.
I was just going to say, in this chart, looking at the relative scale, and so maybe what we can do is provide information particular to your area that the regional planning groups have put together for the manufacturing piece, if that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful. I
Okay,
would
we'll be
appreciate
happy to
that.
do that.
And then just a follow up on that, knowing that industry is coming, especially for South Texas, those ports are desal plants that are, we're just got permitting for Corpus Christi, and they're looking for in Brownsville and other areas. In the fund buckets, the pools of money that are going to be available, are any of those going to be in the form of grants for those big size projects? Obviously, ratepayers are going to take a hit on those very, very expensive desalination projects. Are there any buckets that are being created for that? For grant opportunities?
What we've seen for, and Brian's, please jump in, but what we've seen for desal projects, and we funded several of those, is they've come through the SWIFT program, and so there's been a subsidy to help bring down the interest rate. And that's what we've done so far for those big projects. That's what we've seen, particularly in the Corpus area.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Well, good, but I guess my question.
And with respect to, we haven't done grants to date for those big projects.
Correct. For the record, Brian McMath, Executive Administrator, Texas Water Development Board. Chairwoman Stepney is correct, primarily using the SWIFT program to fund large desal projects, subsidized loans. To be determined at this point how we'll administer the new water supply for Texas Fund. But if I was predicting the future a bit, we'll probably take a similar approach. One of the things we want to do is make sure that we're administering funds kind of fairly. And so we look across our programs and try to achieve a semblance of parity with respect to financial assistance. That said, we do have the ability to grant in certain programs. And so if there is an economic need, you can think of kind of small communities that don't have the rate base available. We do consider that when we're looking at structuring our financing in various programs. And so it's definitely on our radar.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Any other questions, members? Senator Perry.
Thank you guys for being here. A couple of things, just kind of more informational. The production, agricultural production, basically irrigation, is declining. I want people to know this, that it's not declining for lack of a need. It's declining because the water is too expensive or not there to pool. So I don't want to leave here a disillusion that, hey, we're going to be okay because farmers don't need as much. They need the same. They're really good stewards of it, but that didn't change. So we're basically saying on the front end, we're willing to give up an agricultural sector at some point. I mean, 30% reduction in anybody's business input means you're not going to stay in business. So that, and there's other costs associated with losing your agricultural sector. Secondly, and I appreciate Mr. French's, it is 6 million acre feet we're looking for. And with just things that I know that we went through, it's possible, not guaranteed, but possible that about 2.5 million of that could be surface water, which is good, cheap water. Some outside the state, some inside the state. So we're talking about 3 million acre feet through other measures and metrics. We talk about the drought of record, and that's our target, right? If we can survive in a drought, then we can survive getting there. But I want to caution, droughts are not statewide every time, thank goodness. We've had a few of those. But there are areas that suffer droughts pretty much every year, and some of them extend. There's areas of the states that's been in a significant drought for several years. But so when we speak to the drought of record, you have to get a little more regional to understand, because one of those areas has been an extended drought. They're in stage 3 or 4 water requirements. They've curtailed manufacturing by 70%. I mean, by 30% down to 70. It's a $385 million economic impact per day. So, I mean, we need to think that the drought of record is the target, right? For sure. But even between where you're kind of sort of okay and getting to a drought, there are significant events that happen throughout this state. So we need to be able to handle the drought of record for sure. But till you get to the drought of record, unfortunately, the next one, you have issues. On the leaky pipe conversation, and I want to be clear, I think the state has a role in leveraging and helping. That is also a very localized and regional, and we need to partner because it's expensive. Same time, in perspective, I've got to keep it in perspective, because when you hear the gallons, it is kind of shocking. 158.2 billion gallons. It's a lot of water. But when you consider it converted to acre feet over our annual usage, 15.2 million acre feet per year in supply was the last number that I was able to find. 158.2 billion gallons leaking is 3.2% of annual supply. So as we go through this and as conversations ensue, and the split of how we divide that money is important, we have to knock supply out in a significant way, and we have to partner with locals. Additionally to the leaky pipe conversation, today in this budget biennium, if we follow through as a state budget that has currently been proposed, $130 million state money to pull down $700 million of federal dollars for that would tribute to those leaky pipe funds, if you will. So there's other funding opportunities that are not available to developing new supply. Historically, we've always had a funding match for feds. It's not been 700. It could be smaller, and that could be bigger than that, depending on the flavor of the day out of D.C. But my point, I guess, is with local participation at some level, already probably most of these are collecting some fees to do some of this stuff. And with federal match opportunities and with state dollars, those are fundings. That's a $1.3 billion. If we get the baseline budget of 2.5 passed, 500 million would currently go as projected into those funds, plus 700 million, plus 130, over 1.3 billion dollars available for that programs that address some of the leaky infrastructure. So hear me clearly. I'm supportive of helping. But companies don't call Texas and say, if we come, do your pipes leak? They ask, is there water in the pipes? And we have to get on that train first to be able to continue where we're at. So that's why this debate over how much goes where is important. And I think if you take it in context with all of that information, you know, when you hear 60% water loss, and there is a concentrated area in different municipals across the state that it is high, too high. And unfortunately, a couple of them are large municipals or large areas, so that the proportion of that 158 is skewed to one area or more in a couple of cities. We need to help. But our focus has to be on the eye on the ball, and the eye on the ball is new supply in the pipes. Thank you for that.
I mean, I do have one question. So, economic growth in the future. Talking a lot about AI, data centers, and we talk a lot regarding electricity with data centers, and that we are trying not to regulate them to the point that they go to Ohio, Louisiana, other places. But typically those data centers are evaporative cooled with an HVAC backup. And as I hear plans of West Texas development of data centers, what pocket is that going into, and are we calculating properly for the that demand? It's one thing to have electricity out there and, you know, inexpensive land, but if you don't have water, it's very expensive to operate with HVAC.
Yes, for the data centers, the AI centers, what do we call it? The emerging tech facilities. Certainly, unless they're air cooled, there's a water demand. And so what our staff have done thus far is we send out surveys to try to get estimates when we know of a facility going in or to the municipality. And in some ways it's difficult because a lot of times they work directly with the municipality, and so we don't really know where they are. But we have sent out surveys. Some have replied, some haven't. And they would either go into the municipal bucket or the manufacturing bucket. But typically the manufacturing bucket is when they produce something. So we're just looking to get more data in that space. Anything to add?
I think I understand your answer. I don't know that your answer makes me comfortable with the data that we have, and which, because that's what my question was, which bucket is that going in? And it sounds like we don't really know much about the data or which bucket it's going in.
Again, Matt Nelson. The data center water use, if we don't know about a facility, it would generally fall into a municipal category. So it's already being captured. But we have now taken recently the step to separate out data center water use and identify all those facilities as its own subcategory so we can track that, because it's emerging, and we're doing research to find where other facilities are, looking at the comptroller who has collected information on data centers to build a separate pocket so we can project for them and make sure we're covering those. And along the way, we also work with, we look at ERCOT's projections, energy projections, and from those, we have to project associated water use. And so we're also looking at that and focusing on, what are data centers going to look like? Where are they going to go? And it's a tricky thing with data centers. I think that probably the biggest factor with those and where they can locate is actually the grid itself. And so we're looking to the electric, ERCOT and electric providers to give an indication of where things are going and where they may appear. And so we're specifically researching that uniquely right now to address it. Right, we do annual water use survey across the state. And so municipalities report on water use, manufacturers report on water use, specific manufacturers who we know exist. We survey them. And when we can detect, for example, that there's a data center being served by a municipality, sometimes they don't report it as a separate thing, but we can detect it. Our staff look at the data, they can see there's a seller and a buyer, and it's a data center. We take them out, and then we start surveying them as a targeted survey. So we specifically can collect information on data centers. And it's really emerging right now, and we want to pay attention because it is going to diverge from the typical municipal water use demand, which is maybe relatively flat or increasing, but the data centers could, rocket off. And so we're looking at how we can detect that and anticipate it. And you can amend regional water plans to, along the way, when you see this happening, that can be amended and to address it.
All right, so I'm going to repeat what I think you said is, we're hoping the municipalities will put it into the municipal bucket, but we're trying to start recently to recognize it and somehow track it and add it to the numbers that are existing.
It's right now. It's in there. As I say, it's like ragu.
Are
It's
we
in there.
certain?
It's in municipal or it's in manufacturing now. We're trying to separate it so we can actually see it as its own separate subcategory and track it more specifically. So it's already being captured, the existing water use.
Is
It's
it
it's the
being
projections
captured?
that are difficult.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Is it being captured based on the responses to the surveys?
Yes.
But I just heard that the surveys aren't being returned.
I said some are.
They don't know. They don't always return surveys. It's not they don't go to jail if they don't.
So-
but we get pretty good responses, and we have staff who we use the word hound, but we do follow up with a lot of folks, and we get well over 90% of all water use in Texas surveyed and responded to. And as far as data centers, municipalities, when they report their water use, they report all their water use, and if they're serving a data center, it's in there. And our job is to see if we can detect it and pull it out and separate it.
Well, and I guess that's a little bit of my point. Yeah, if the data center's already there, Tarrant Regional Water, they know Facebook's usage, but we got potentially 5 to 6 gigs going out into West Texas. My guess is Abilene's not calculated what the numbers are turned in. Probably doesn't have that water in their municipal usage. And so I don't want to belabor this. We don't talk about it, but it is going to be a significant demand, and I want to make sure that we are preparing and tracking it because it's going to grow exponentially. And we talk about the electricity a lot, and whether we want it or don't want it or, what it's going to do to the state. But we just haven't talked about the water demand and knowing that typically those are evaporative cooled for energy, for cost reasons. When I think, and I hear where they're going, I'm going, we don't have enough water out there now. So anyway, I just want to bring it to light and make sure that we categorize that and we're tracking it, not just what's being used today, but trying to prepare for the future, which is what this is all about.
Well, I can promise that we're talking a lot about it and
Right.
focusing on it to bring it out as its own category because it's going to have its own trajectory, right? And if we don't start collecting that now and looking at that and being able to track that, we won't be able to project that separately because it won't have the same pattern as municipal water use. And last thing I will add, if I may, there's a historical water use. We've captured their water use in that historical. That's the easy part.
Right.
The hard part is projecting the future where it's going to be, and so we're working towards that. And the power demands is going to help direct some of that.
That's why I bring it up. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Senator, what I was going to say, in the recent report we did with the Baker Institute at Rice University, it pointed out that with this Texas economic miracle, this economic expansion, you have a growth in a lot of your water-intensive industries, like data centers, petchem facilities, semiconductor manufacturers, auto manufacturers, which are also going to drive up that water demand. But what we're also finding is, like, when you get the expansion of these, water-intensive industries, it turns a lot of value to the state in terms of increase of economic growth and earnings.
Right, and that's why I want to make sure that we capture both the energy side and the water demand side so that we can continue the growth in the economic.
You're absolutely right there. I mean, you couldn't have this economic expansion without those two factors.
Well, and they always come together. Anytime you have generation, there's a water demand there to cool those.
52%.
They go hand in hand, and we need to talk to them about it that way. All right. Yeah.
Brian, you got
Yeah, just to add, last week, in fact, Chairwoman Stepney and I met with a couple sister agencies, TCQ and PUC, and Chairman Gleason indicated that they do collect a lot of this type of information, not only on the electric side, but also they could collect it on the water side from not only electric providers or electricity providers, but also their users. And so we're already kind of analyzing where the resources are that we could collect more information, and happy to work together with our sister agencies to just get as much clarity as we can. We recognize it's a big deal.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, guys. I'd just say 52% of the new generation the state wants to put on the grid requires water, either to cool it or to power, steam power. But Abilene will be the biggest data center in the world, I think, is what they were said. So if you can get that one nailed down, you'll have a good
idea.
Kind of a good idea where the worst case scenario, or actually the most water could be used, not worst. In that frame, I don't want to talk a lot about it, but the 27 water plan is in the works, and you guys are bringing together data today. I'm not here to remove things in the plan that can't happen, but if it can't happen, don't put it in the plan. And I don't know what that metric is, but if the average time, and I don't know what the new average is for reservoir, if it's 30, 40 years, and they're telling you they're going to have water on this line in 25 years, that's one that you need to have a real hard conversation. And y'all did a very good job of getting I have a map of all reservoirs and where they're at. And so as you have these conversations with regional planning groups, reiterate that if it's not real, don't put it in. And I know they lose funding opportunities if it's not in the plan, but if they can get their act together, or if they choose that they can get through the politics and economic realities of getting a reservoir online, they can come back and we can amend it back into the plan. But I'm telling you guys, 7 million acre feet, you had the 2.5 that we didn't talk about for irrigation, and you had another 2.5 probably for not reservoirs, and that's where that 12 million acre feet starts coming into reality. So as this 27 plan together, focus a little bit on what they're pitching and see if you can buy it, what they're selling.
Yes, sir. And the chart that you mentioned, Chairman Perry, now that we have our draft regional water plans we can update that chart. We affectionately refer to that as our dot race, and we'll get that to the committee as soon as we can.
I'm not against reservoirs at any level. If they can get done, I think that's great. But at the end of the day, if they can't get done and we're banking on them getting done, that leads to bad outcomes. So thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, a lot of what we've just discussed, it's going to be a lot of economic expansion that's going to take place across West Texas. And we talk about, the economics and what it's going to bring. But I can tell you, speaking from, a lifelong citizen of West Texas, coming from an industry that has had billions and billions of dollars taken from it, we need to make sure somehow as legislators that some of that money gets back to those communities, because they're the ones going to have to figure out how they're going to have water for all their municipalities. So just for the record.
Yep. Thank you. Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on what Senator Hancock was saying, that was exactly my concern regarding if you're capturing that water need for data centers and manufacturing, or in our case in South Texas, ports, industry, through your numbers on your municipal side. Still, you look at your map and you're showing a rather flat growth in municipal growth, both in West Texas and South Texas. So it's highly concerning that we actually have those numbers. I mean, it's literally, we build it, they'll come. We get water resolved. We've got people coming to Port of Corpus Christi, Port of Brownsville, and so it's I don't see that anticipation here on this map. It's a concern.
Yes, sir, Senator, I appreciate that. Do keep in mind that this is based on our prior state water plan, or current. With the draft regional water plans in now, we'll have an updated state water plan in place in 26 or 2027. We'll have that issued in late 26. So we will have better projections with respect to certain areas, whether it's municipal or other uses. So, but those draft regional water plans are available now, and we'll follow up with your office to get you a copy of your area.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Thank you, panel. I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time. Next, we will call up, and members, we're going to have this next one split into two different panels, or two different parts. So the chair calls up Bob Reed, Texas Farm Bureau, Hector Rivera with Texas Chemical Council, Tony Bennett with Association of Manufacturers,